in Washington, and there's new information about the early reports of a plane crashing at or near Camp David, the presidential retreat outside of Maryland. Jim?
Dan, the FBI now is trying to sort together what has actually happened here and what they still don't understand. And what they do know has happened is, of course, 3 separate terrorist attacks in the United States: the World Trade Center, at the Pentagon, and some event that has occurred in Pennsylvania, including that affected a commercial airliner. Because of the proximity of that crash of the commercial airline in Pennsylvania to Camp David, there is a presumption by some in law enforcement that Camp David may have been the target of that attack. That, of course, was a hijacked commercial aircraft that we are told did not respond to repeated attempts to communicate with it either by the military or the FAA. Now, other things that the government is confirming at this hour: number one, they received no warnings. They had no hint of any attack against domestic targets in the United States. Number two, they have not received any claim for any of these attacks from anyone. And number three, although they have no evidence that this is the case, they are assuming and presuming that there could be additional attacks within the United States and are reacting appropriately. To do so, they have set up command posts, we are told, in Washington, in Phoenix, and in Los Angeles. Moments ago, the Attorney General of the United States returned from out of town. He was taken by an armored car convoy to the FBI headquarters. Would you ask him, please? Excuse me, Dan, we have a little bit of confusion here in our newsroom at the moment. I can also say that the intelligence community is now saying officially that they do believe that these attacks have the signature, as one official put it, of the Al-Qaeda organization. That, of course, is the terrorist organization that is under the control of Osama bin Laden. They said that is, quote, our lead theory. Dan?
Jim Stewart in Washington. Now, at Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana, President Bush is about to come out. We believe this is live, although we've been told earlier that it'd be played on videotape. Here is the president.
Way to a building and joined some police officers who were inside, and as the blackness began to lift and this gray thick smoke clung in the air, we were able to find a police car and make our way out of the area. The policeman stopping along the way to pick up 2 injured people and leave them at a Midtown hospital, and subsequently made my way here.
What about collateral damage to other buildings in the area? Those, of course, are the classic canyons of lower Manhattan, and as that building came down, it did create a kind of tornadic wind that went through there.
Absolutely, much like the images that were created for the movie Independence Day. When New York was exploding, the corridors of lower Manhattan are so narrow and channel so much wind, even just on a plain windy day, that this material blew through in a way that was really unimaginable. It was truly frightening. It continued to rain down for several minutes, as you can see there, and the winds just whipped through these corridors for several minutes, eventually calming down to such an extent where there was just a thick gray haze throughout the entire area, Tom.
All right, thanks very much, CNBC's Ron Insana, who was right in the middle of it all today. New York City effectively has been shut down. All tunnels in and out of the city have been closed for security reasons. The airports are closed. The subways are closed. Traffic has been removed from the streets. All hospitals are on extra alert. One right kind of in the middle of it all at ground zero is St. Vincent's Hospital. And NBC's Robert Bazell is there, as he has been all morning. Robert, any additional word on casualties?
Well, Tom, actually there have been about 200 casualties, some of them very severe, at least 8 deaths, and 5 of those were firefighters or policemen. We're not sure which one. But one of the things that's amazing about being here is that it has been much slower than anyone anticipated. That's a lot of casualties, of course, and but the casualties have been coming out of lower Manhattan at a much slower speed than people anticipated. I think just because as one rescue worker who had been down there told me, it's just hell down there. You can't move around. You can't discern who's a body part from a living human being in several of the areas. So we have a very dedicated staff standing by, large numbers of medical workers are ready to attend to anybody who appears.
Bob.
Several have been very severely injured, but we're still waiting.
All right, Bob, we now have the videotape of President Bush, who was diverted from Florida to Barksdale Air Force Base near Shreveport, Louisiana. This is what he had to say to the nation moments ago.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested. But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
President George W. Bush, in his capacity today, not only as President of the United States, but also as Commander-in-Chief as U.S. military forces around the world are on the highest possible alert. There is so much uncertainty in this situation. Who is responsible? When it could happen again? And where? These are questions that are still unresolved as we try to work our way through this day. I'm joined on the telephone now by the former National Security Advisor in the Clinton administration, Sandy Berger, a longtime veteran of national security matters in this country. Mr. Berger, in all of your contingency planning during your days in the White House, did you ever anticipate anything like this, 4 hijacked airliners that would be driven into the Twin Trade Towers and the Pentagon?
Well, Tom, I think for some time we have known that terrorism is the greatest security threat that this country faced. We've seen some horrible incidents here before. We broke up a multi-pronged effort on Millennium Weekend, but this certainly goes beyond anything that we have seen before in its dimensions and sophistication.
As we work our way through this day of shock and grief and still trying to count the number of casualties, we also have to say, however, that there has been a stunning failure of intelligence at the highest possible level. The American people are going to wonder why they spent billions of dollars of intelligence if we can't find out about a complex operation like this that involves so many people.
Well, I think all of that is going to have to be sifted out. I think that in the midst of our outrage and anger, President Bush is right. We have to show the world that we will respond to this both with determination and with steadiness. That means first, obviously, focusing on security and on rescue, then on determining who's responsible, and this is of such magnitude that it's inconceivable to me that we will not soon know what the origin of this is, and then how we did not detect this, since it obviously involved a multiple operation based on from the United States. But blame, I think, the blame game, I think, comes, in my judgment, after we do everything we can to take care of the people who are in those buildings. We assure the security of others who may be in situations that are vulnerable, and we find out who is responsible for this absolutely horrifying set of events.
Mr. Berger, it's just not a matter of assigning blame. That's not the question. The question is, how do we get our intelligence back on track so it doesn't happen again in the next 20 minutes or the next 20 hours?
Well, I think we have to recognize that this is the overwhelming security threat to the nation, more so than any foreign nation, more so than long-range missiles. Terrorism has been and continues to be the #1 threat to our people. I think the intelligence community has intensified its efforts over the years, but this simply demonstrates that we're certainly not doing enough.
Sandy Berger, thank you very much for being with us today on what is obviously a day of great trial for this country, a great tragedy, and we have to determine how we go from here once we do begin to sort out just how many lives were lost, who is responsible for all of this, and how we can protect ourselves from this kind of attack again in the future as it continues to play out across America. Robert Knowles is on the phone with us now. He was on the 54th floor, I'm told, of one of the World Trade Center buildings when one of the planes was flown into it. Mr. Knowles, you're safely at home? When one of the planes was flown into it, Mr. Knowles, you're safely at home?
Yes, sir.
Could you turn down your television? I can hear it in the background, and that will cause us some problems if
Yes,
we
sir.
continue our discussion. Okay. Tell me exactly where you were and what happened to you.
I was on the 54th floor,
Of #1 building or #2?
#1 building.
And when were you first aware of the attack?
Well, something hit the building, and it knocked me to the floor, and then the whole window blew out of the office I was in, and it snatched the desk out of the office like it was a piece of paper.
And how did you get out of that office?
By the grace of God, I was holding on to the door so I wouldn't be sucked out the window.
And then did you go down the stairs?
Yeah, going down the stairs was really rough because it was from the 30th floor down. It was water. The sprinklers was on, and then I pray to God for the people in the wheelchairs because they couldn't get out. They were sitting there waiting for somebody to carry them down.
How many people did you see like that, Mr. Knowles?
2 people. They were invalids. You know, they couldn't get out the wheelchairs. It wasn't a regular wheelchair. It was the kind of wheelchair where they do everything in a wheelchair.
It was a heavy mechanical wheelchair of some kind.
Yes, sir.
And then as you made your way to the bottom, that stairwell was crowded with other people trying to get out?
Yes, sir, but God bless the fact that it happened early, because if it had happened at 10:30, it would have been chaos because you couldn't get down the stairs. Between the smoke and the lights being out in the water, and the staircase was slippery.
When you finally got to the ground floor, then what happened?
Then they herded us out of the building. They told us to walk fast. We walked up towards Broadway, up Nassau, and it was glass blown from everywhere.
When you were in your office when the first explosion occurred, that was the first building that was hit.
Yes, sir.
And were there lots of people in the building at that hour?
It was a good amount of people, but not lots.
It was not full to capacity?
No, thank God.
And were there other people who, so far as you could tell, were either seriously hurt or killed in the first explosion that you could find?
No, everybody I seen was mobile. They were able to get out the building. You know, people were coughing, people fell on the stairs. They weren't hurt from the explosion. They were hurt trying to get out of the building.
Okay, Mr. Knowles, we wish you the very best, and by the grace of God, you were able to get out of there, and we know that this has been a difficult time for you, but we thank you for sharing your experience with us today.
Thank you.
Going to go to Washington now. Senator John McCain, who has declared this an act of war on the United States. It's already being described as a kind of 21st century Pearl Harbor, Senator McCain?
I think that's accurate in many respects, Tom, although clearly the implications of this are very significant, and including the fact that at least we knew exactly who it was that took these actions against the United States at Pearl Harbor. And obviously at this point we don't know who it was or which organization or nation may have been sponsoring this kind of activity.
We're obviously in the early stages dealing still with the shock and the grief, trying to count the number of casualties, but this country will have to take immediate action in terms of how we rearrange ourselves now to hope that we don't have this happen again. We're going to have some profound changes in America, Senator.
I'm afraid so. I think that our lifestyles will not be the same for a very long period of time because of security requirements. I also think that, as I was watching you earlier, there is going to have to be an evaluation about our intelligence capability, and part of that evaluation will be recognition that we don't have the kind of human intelligence capabilities that perhaps we need. We have excellent technical capabilities, but a lot of times you have to have someone on the ground to penetrate these organizations so you can know their intentions rather than their actions. But look, this is a terrible, unspeakable act. I believe the American people will rally behind and support the President of the United States, and I believe that we will find out who did this, and I think we will respond. And I don't know how you could describe it, very frankly, any other way but an act of war.
You grew up in the conventional military, and we have such an investment in all of that, but for some time national security officials across all administrations have been saying the great threat to this country is terrorism. Have we devoted enough attention to this kind of an act?
It's very difficult for me to second guess. I think there's going to be plenty of that kind of activity. I would repeat that when I talk to people in the field and when I travel around the world, our lack of human intelligence capability, part of that is the difficulty in penetrating some of these organizations. As you know, they're very difficult, but that may be an area that would have to be addressed. Our technical capabilities, our satellites and others are absolutely superb and sometimes phenomenal, but you've got to divine people's motives. As I said, you've got to get these things before the act is being carried out, and that's probably an area that we have to look at. But I'm sure that this administration and the Congress will devote all their efforts to making sure not only that the people who perpetrated it are punished, but also that it never happens again.
Senator, is it too early to speculate on whether or not we're going to need protective air cover over the nation's capital and some of our more critical areas?
I don't know. I do know that average citizens are going to find it a much more complicated process going to an airport and getting onto an airplane. That'll be one of the first, obviously, one of the first and necessary evaluations that are needed, because I think it's pretty clear now that these planes were hijacked, and how they were able to do that in the case of at least 4 airplanes is going to be a subject of great interest and perhaps some controversy, because there's been this issue of security at airports for a long period of time. How much inconvenience versus how much security, which has been one debate that's been in Congress and in other areas of government as well. So I think that rather than attacking it from having air cover over the Capitol, perhaps we ought to devote our efforts to going places where these acts of terror originate. That would probably be much more effective and cost-effective as well.
Senator, we're still dealing, as I say, with the initial stages of shock, but in fact, it is hard to overstate the magnitude of all of this or the continuing effect that it will have on the business of this nation.
I don't. There's never been anything like this in our lifetime. Pearl Harbor was a horrible and dastardly deed, and I don't like to compare it to Pearl Harbor. But this is unprecedented in its scope and frankly, its efficiency.
Senator John McCain, thank you very much for being with us today.
Tom.
Thank you. Under these very difficult circumstances. It's also worth pointing out that in Pearl Harbor, it was a military attack on a military installation. This was an attack by terrorists using innocent American civilians, for the most part, in hijacked airliners directed at targets filled with civilians, with the exception of the Pentagon, obviously. Let's go to NBC's Robert Hager now for an update. 4 planes hijacked today, Bob, 2 United, 2 American. Bring us up to date.
With a total toll just in the airplanes, so thousands dead presumably on the ground, but just in the airplanes, 266 dead. She said 2 American planes, 2 United planes. 2 of those planes were taking off from Boston, 1 from Newark, and 1 from Washington Dulles. 2 went into the World Trade Center buildings, 1 went into the Pentagon, and 1 crashed in rural Pennsylvania with no idea where that one was being hijacked to. At last report, and this report was about 40 minutes ago, there were now only 50 planes left in the air, 50 commercial flights over domestic U.S. airspace. So that is saying no new flights were being allowed to take off, haven't since 9:30 Eastern Time this morning. The planes that were already in the air were allowed to continue on. There were only 50 of those still in the air. They were mostly about 20 minutes away from airports, so presumably almost all of those should have landed by now. There were also 22 international flights still in the air, heading here. Initially, the word was they were going to be diverted to Canada, and then the decision was made that that would be just too hard for Canadians to handle, and so those 22 flights were going to be allowed to land in the U.S. So far, we don't know of any of them landing. But this is a very important point. The FAA knew of no problems with any of those 50 planes still in the air in the U.S. or 22 in international airspace bound here. So that would seem to indicate that the problems are over in terms of these hijackings. Just to run the flights down very quickly, the first was an American airliner, Boston to Los Angeles. There were 92 killed on board that one. It went into the World Trade Center. That was the first event. Then there was